That's our tradition. If we may recite the full weight test of the things we think, say, or do, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned?
Well, thank you all. Boy, what a rambunctious group of men and women here at the Lancaster Rotary. I want to thank you so much, Madam President. I'm honored to be with you here today. The Rotary Club of Lancaster is an outstanding organization, as we've all seen. You do so much good for the Lancaster community and communities around the world. I, too, am a Rotarian at the Harrisburg Club, and we don't have meetings as interesting as this. I usually sleep through them. I bring you greetings from Harrisburg, and by the way, I checked in with the state treasury before I came down here today. Rest assured, your state tax dollars are in good hands and are being spent wisely and responsibly. That's a joke. You can laugh. Now, as the great Admiral James Stockdale once said during a vice presidential debate, who am I and why am I here? The who am I am a political pundit, a lawyer, a talk radio show host, and a columnist. Why am I here? Well, you'll have to ask your speakers committee. And I want to thank fellow Rotarian John Espenshade for providing me with this opportunity. So if I bomb or worse, bore you, don't blame John. I told him I'm an exciting and dynamic speaker, and he believed me. Yes, regrettably, I'm a lawyer, and I know what you're thinking. Go ahead and think it. It's the ultimate buzzkill, isn't it? I'm at a party, the atmosphere is festive, people are in a good mood. Then I get that question, and what do you do? I pause before answering, and then in sort of a half apology say, oh, I'm a lawyer. Often they respond with a sigh, oh. Recently, I started responding with, I'm a funeral director. I get a much more positive response. I've been asked to share my thoughts on the law, politics, and the media, but the law is so boring. Let's just talk about politics and the media. That will liven this group up, although I don't think you need anything else to liven you up. Like many college students, I didn't know what I wanted to do when I grew up, so I decided to go to law school. But before starting classes in the fall of 1994, I wanted to spend my summer in what I then thought would be a worthy cause. So I entered politics. Right? A worthy cause? Down the street from where I worked was the campaign office of a young congressman running for the United States Senate named Rick Santorum. Hold the applause, please. I want to get through this speech. I walked into the campaign office and was offered a job on the spot for a grand total of $0 per hour, plus no benefits, and I got to pay my own expenses. I gladly accepted. Because the minute I walked into that office with the phone ringing off the hook, volunteers stuffing envelopes, and campaign workers running to and fro with that look of earnestness and seriousness, as if the world depended upon their every move, I was hooked. I was in charge of coalition groups such as Farmers for Santorum, Physicians for Santorum, and of course, due to my last name, Italian Americans for Santorum. I traveled all over Pennsylvania touting Santorum's record and positions. I found myself sitting at the table of honor at the Bedford County Farm Bureau dinner, sitting next to the Bedford County Dairy Princess. And there I watched and learned as she gave that royal wave to the farmers of Bedford County. I was also assigned to be the full-time aide to Aldo, Rick's now deceased father. Aldo had been born in Italy under the reign of Benito Mussolini, and his family had fled to America. So we went to every Italian-American club we could find, and Aldo would get up to that stage and talk about his son's candidacy, and then he would go off the rails and start lambasting Mussolini and Italian fascism in Italian. Now, as a young political aide, this was my first encounter with crisis management, how to prevent a candidate from going off the rails. And last year, I volunteered on the presidential campaign of Donald Trump, so I have some experience in this area. Toward the end of the campaign, Santorum was asked by a college student, you may remember, about how to ensure the solvency of Social Security for their generation. Defying standard political advice, Santorum answered the question honestly, and he paid the price politically. Santorum said we need to increase the retirement age to 67, and I'd go even further if I could. And I can still hear those words ringing in my ears today because they were on every radio and television station across Pennsylvania every day until Election Day. Polls had us 12 points up until Santorum gave that answer a little over 2 weeks out of Election Day. We then plunged in the polls to a few points down a day or two before the election. But we squeaked it out. We won by just over 2% of the vote. How did we win? Santorum got the conservative Republican base out and did well with Reagan blue-collar Democrats. So did Santorum 94 pave the way for Trump in 2016? Republicans won major victories across the country that year and regained control of Congress for the first time since the 1950s. The media labeled it the year of the angry white male. Interestingly, the media labeled the congressional election before in 1992 as the year of the woman. Not the angry woman or the angry white female, just the celebratory and lovely year of the woman. Fair and balanced? Santorum took me with him to Washington. I started to work in the Senate on day one of the Republican Revolution. So these were the halcyon days of my youth, the days of the contract of America. Newt Gingrich was elected Speaker of the House. My boss led the Republican Revolution in the Senate. We got into those dramatic standoffs with President Clinton on the budget. But the media demonized us for wanting to cut Medicare and kill off Big Bird and Ernie and Bert. President Clinton caused the federal government to shut down twice by vetoing spending bills sent to him by the Republican Congress. The media, however, blamed the Republicans. Clinton won, and we lost in the eyes of the American people. In the spring of 1996, Santorum sent me to Harrisburg to work for then State Senator Mike Fisher, who was running for Attorney General. The Fisher 96 election was similar to the Santorum 94 election. Both were conservative Republicans from Pittsburgh running against liberal Democrats from Philadelphia. And in both cases, we were losing most of election night until the votes came in from rural counties of Pennsylvania's famed T, which is anchored, by the way, in the Republican stronghold of Lancaster County. In both cases, we started to turn the tide around 11 p.m. and we ended up winning very late and very close. Like Santorum 94, we won by about 2% of the vote. And by the way, and I say this with some foreboding, think the 2016 presidential election, the media got the Fisher race so wrong, the Associated Press called the race for our opponent. We started drafting a concession speech, and then later the AP retracted when the T came in and we won. Fisher took me with him to Harrisburg, where I worked as executive assistant to the Attorney General. By the spring of 2001, Fisher was running for governor of Pennsylvania. He asked me to join his campaign as his policy director, and I did. But when I got started, I seemed to have lost some of the zeal for politics. And after a few months, I resigned my position. You see, I left politics to enter a more honest profession, the law. Well, actually, I had fallen out of love with politics and in love with a young Perry County lawyer. She and I were lawyers in love, as the song goes. We went to work for her parents, who were also both lawyers in Perry County. It was a dramatic transition for me. My fancy political friends from Harrisburg and D.C. were shocked. It became a joke on the Fisher campaign. Whenever an aide expressed dissatisfaction with the campaign, he was told to stick it out or be sent to Perry County to practice law. When Santorum learned what I had done and where I had gone, he shook his head and asked, why? But I had grown tired of writing speeches and working on policy. It seemed indirect and impersonal and so disconnected from reality. I wanted to work with people in a direct way and have a real impact in the lives of real people, not politicians, lobbyists, or political activists. Real, live, everyday people. And so by doing divorce, custody, DUI, and criminal defense, boy, did I ever. By 2005, my wife and I had started our own law firm and started growing and expanding. We now have 18 attorneys working out of 7 offices across central Pennsylvania, including here in Lancaster. And over those years, I was minding my own business and building my own business when along came Barack Obama. That and the financial crisis of 2008 with the massive government bailout of failed Wall Street investment banks pushed me out of my private life and back into politics. I knew the Republican Party, my party, would be no different than the Democrat Party, and both would put Wall Street in front of Main Street. And I was energized by the Tea Party movement sweeping the country. So I decided to run for the Republican nomination to the United States Senate. The United Press International's headline read, "Ex Santorum aide plans Senate run." The Daily Caller headline read, "Former Santorum aide eyes U.S. Senate seat." The first sentence of the article read, "An ex-aide to Pennsylvanian Rick Santorum wants to reclaim what his old boss lost in 2006. I thought, reclaim? I hadn't said more than a few words to Santorum in the previous 17 years. My campaign was largely a rejection of a lot of the Bush-era Republican policies that Santorum loudly supported. Santorum didn't even support me and was trying to recruit other candidates to run. So for a while, the media associated me as the Santorum candidate, and that kind of put a pall over my campaign because he had become unpopular. I remember constantly having to say, "I'm not Rick Santorum, I'm my own man." And after people heard me speak and watched me campaign, I then became known in the media as the Tea Party candidate. That more accurately fit the bill. The Harrisburg Patriot News even referred to me as the citizen politician the founding fathers dreamed of running the government. I thought that reporter hit the nail on the head, don't you think? An excellent analysis. Yes, I was a real long shot, but stranger things had happened. Political neophytes backed by the Tea Party surged in 2010, won Republican U.S. Senate primaries in Alaska and Delaware. And I felt no career politician would be crazy enough to challenge Bob Casey. And so I would have a chance to win the nomination. But wealthy Republican donors were sitting this one out, and I couldn't raise the money. Toward the end of the campaign, I started to pick up some support from Ron Paul activists. Several of my positions were similar to his, and I had the honor of sitting with Dr. Paul at a luncheon in Pittsburgh before a big rally. He teased me about working for Santorum. Remember the two of them going at it fiercely during the Republican presidential primary, Paul even referring to Santorum during one debate as fake, and Rick responding by saying, "I'm real, Ron. Here, touch me." So I started out in the race, according to the media, as the ex-Santorum aide, then became the Tea Party candidate, and then ended up being the Ron Paul candidate. But all along, I was and remained the Marc Scaringi candidate. But that name didn't sell papers or generate clicks on websites. Well, after the primary, I went back to my law practice. One morning in the fall of 2015, the wife of the owner of WHYL in Carlisle texted me. She told me she followed my campaign and read my articles on Penn Live, the Patriot News, and asked if I had thought of doing talk radio. I soon found myself hosting a weekly talk radio show called The Marc Scaringi Show on WHYL 960 AM. We then became syndicated and were picked up on a station in Chambersburg. And although I had been interviewed on the radio many times, I had never hosted a talk radio show before and was apprehensive about filling up the airtime. So I prepared a book report, strangely enough, for a talk radio show host, but I didn't know what I was doing. The book, Crippled America, How to Make America Great Again by Donald J. Trump. The phones, they lit up. And I quickly learned that if you want calls, clicks, and ratings, talk about Donald Trump. Have I become the media I've so often criticized? In December of 2015, I was contacted by the Trump campaign and asked if I would help organize Pennsylvania. I said yes and got right to work. This was about the time of the Pennsylvania Society weekend in New York. Trump was to be the guest speaker at the lunch at the Plaza Hotel. Now, this was about a month before the first primary, and Trump was still atop the polls. But earlier that week, Trump had announced his controversial Muslim ban, and the media had gone berserk. My own publisher, the Patriot News, called for the GOP to withdraw Trump's invitation. Republican heavyweights in Pennsylvania, like former Governor Tom Ridge, declined to attend because of Trump's presence. U.S. Senator Pat Toomey said he couldn't make it. But I was more than happy to go. And that weekend turned into one of the most surreal in my life. As my family and I were walking out of our hotel, we walked into a massive convergence of protesters, media, tourists, and regular New Yorkers. You see, Lady Gaga was arriving at the restaurant just to the left of our hotel, and Donald Trump was arriving at the plaza, which is just to the right of our hotel. So out of my left eye, I saw a flash of big, beautiful Lady Gaga hair, and out of my right eye, I saw a flash of big, beautiful Donald Trump hair. My kids and wife ran toward Lady Gaga, I toward Donald Trump. I will never forget the lunch at the plaza. I walked into that ornate dining room gilded with gold leaf and took my seat. Donald Trump saunters onto the stage, slumps over the podium, and begins to give this off-the-cuff speech. No notes, all anecdotal. He immediately references how beautiful the dining room looks and takes the credit. He explains he redecorated it in the 1990s when he used to own the plaza. He then sees a businessman in the audience and who he apparently knows, and he starts talking about business deals they used to do together in front of the 300 people in the room. He then started talking about how Pennsylvania is benefiting financially from the Marcellus Shale, and he accuses us, the people in the audience, of running pipes up into New York and sucking out all that gas before he could get to it and make money off it. His performance was riveting. One of my table mates told me he had been coming to those luncheons at the plaza for years, and he had never seen this before. And he pointed to the upstairs balcony, and it looked like the entire kitchen staff and the entire wait staff had come out, lined up, and were quietly listening to Trump's speech. And that told me something about Trump's prospects in the spring and fall. Trump connected with people in a way our friends in the mainstream media will never understand, because they don't work in the kitchen of the plaza, they eat in its dining room. Well, then the disruption started. Right behind me, some young men started singing, "Mama, Mama, tell us why our people gotta die. Trump is trying to bring us down, attacking people, black and brown." As security guards surround the group beside me, a melee breaks out, and it looked like a rugby match. And it moved right behind me, and it knocked over a couple of chairs and the light fixture. They got those people out, and the next 4 or 5 protesters out. They brought police dogs through the dining room, and security guards and police were all around. All the while, Trump continues speaking. He asks, what kind of people are they letting in the plaza these days? He asks the protesters as they're being escorted, hey, did you pay for your tickets? He tells the GOP organizers they're not charging enough for these tickets. After the speech was over, people sat around in bewilderment, really, trying to process what had just happened. It's like we had been through a war. And I was supposed to meet my friend and our families for a trip to the Central Park Zoo. Now, my friend is a bit mischievous. He texts me with a message to come out of the plaza at the side entrance because he had someone he wanted me to meet. Unbeknownst to me, the media had gathered there. The main entrance had been shut down because of the protesters. Some of the media suspected Trump might come out the side entrance. Plus, the media were drawn there and then into a frenzy because that's where security guards were throwing, pushing, and escorting the protesters out of the plaza. So unbeknownst to me, I was walking into a political war zone on that sidewalk. So I walk out into that crowded, noisy sidewalk and run up to my friend and the man I was to meet. The man sticks a microphone in my face and starts peppering me with questions about Trump's speech and the protesters. As soon as he puts the microphone in my face, all the other media swarm around me and do the same. The big lights go up, the microphones come out, and the cameras turn on. Now here, my friend had discovered this guy was the New York Daily News reporter waiting for Trump to sneak out the side door. And my friend had told him that he would deliver him one of Trump's top campaign officials. Because the luncheon was closed to the media and they were desperate to find out what happened. Now, I was not that official, but the media thought I was. So for a brief shining moment, there I was holding court with 20 or 30 television, print, and radio reporters from all over the world. And with those lights, the cameras, and the microphones surrounding me, I entered full Trump mode. I started talking about how we're going to build the wall, how Mexico is going to pay for the wall, how we're going to bring our jobs back from China, as he says, and how we're going to make America great again. And I'm having the time of my life. The reporters are waiting on every word with bated breath. Although I did get a little nervous when one of the reporters said to me, "And who are you again?" Now, I was lapping up all of this attention. But there was trouble. There were Black Lives Matter protesters and Muslim protesters. They gathered behind me and on both sides. And they had their "Trump is Vanilla Ice" banner right behind me. They started chanting and taunting me, "Trump boy, go home, Trump boy, go home, Trump boy, back to the plaza." They literally enveloped me and started pulling me by the shoulder, and they were pulling me into them. Now, I wouldn't stop the press conference. They were pushing me down the street, but I've got cameras and microphones in my face, flash bulbs going off. Are there still flash bulbs? There were in my mind. I'm delivering the Trump message, and I'm not going to give it up. Until I looked over at my wife. She looked distraught. And then to my 7-year-old son, who was bawling. And then to my 9-year-old daughter, who had a fierce look on her face. She was running toward the protesters, ready to kick them. And that's when the NYPD came up to me and said, "You've got to stop and get back into the plaza." So I did go reluctantly, but not until I signaled to an ABC TV reporter that I would meet her farther down the sidewalk. So I retreated to the plaza as the Black Lives Matters and Muslim folks cheered in victory. I snuck out the side door and gave that interview to ABC. ABC sent it to its Harrisburg affiliate, and now I'm not only all over the Manhattan Evening News, I'm all over the television news in Harrisburg. And I walked into the parties at the various hotel rooms later that evening to cheers from my friends. I'm feeling on top of the world until I get a call from the Trump campaign contact. And he says, "Mark, Trump Tower called." My first thought was, did the entire building call? I mean, how does a building use a telephone? So I'm trying to picture this in my mind, but I shook that off and listened. And he said, "I have 3 words to deliver to you from Trump Tower. Tone it down." Now imagine that, Donald Trump telling me to tone it down. Now in any event, with the possible exception of Trump Tower, I was the toast of New York that night, or at least the few dozen drunk Republicans who would admit in public to supporting Trump at that point in the primary election. Now, as the actual primary voting got underway, the better Trump performed, the stronger the opposition from the Republican establishment. And I thought the primary would come down to a floor vote at the convention, and anticipated the establishment would work hard to defeat Trump. So I decided to run for delegate to the convention. If I won, I would have a vote on the floor. That I was a Trump delegate with a talk radio show attracted a lot of attention. I was featured on a Voice of America television news story that was broadcast in 20 or 30 countries. The title of the show, "Angry Voters Find Their Voice in Talk Radio." There's that "Angry Voters" again from 1994. My question to the media is, are all Republicans always angry? A friend of my mother's who lived in Denmark was surprised to see me interviewed on German TV. I was surprised to learn people watch German TV in Denmark. I hope that's not foreboding. I was interviewed by a reporter from Le Figaro, the leading French daily. He wrote a story about my show that appeared in that paper and several others around the world. I even appeared in Costa Rica AM, as in Good Morning Costa Rica. I was identified in Le Figaro as Marc Scaringi, juriste et militant conservateur. Now, I don't speak French. What does that mean? Anybody? The titles to the article that I saw are not always the best translation. The article that ran in the Geneva paper was entitled Marc Scaringi, Donald Trump's Voice on Pennsylvanian Conservative Soil. Whatever that means. I met briefly with Mr. Trump backstage at the Harrisburg Farm Show just prior to the Pennsylvania primary election. Has anyone here ever met Donald Trump? You're afraid to raise your hand. Has anyone, he's kind of like the Leonardo DiCaprio character, Jay Gatsby in The Great Gatsby, if you've seen that movie. He makes you feel like $1 million. He grabbed me by the arm and acted like we were old friends from the Knickerbocker Club in New York and we hadn't seen each other in years. I thought for a minute he was going to call me old chum. He certainly did and does have a presence. Well, then came the Pennsylvania primary election, and the voters streamed to the voting booths. I tried handing out my palm cards, but most voters knew exactly whom they would vote for delegate. I saw many of them already had the Trump palm card. Others had the list of Trump-endorsed candidates posted by Sean Hannity on his website. And Democrats were coming to me and asking me how to vote for Trump. This was during the primary. I said to them, you'll have to wait for the fall. But that's more foreboding of things to come. Trump won Pennsylvania bigly, as he would say, and I, along with my 2 other Trump-endorsed delegate candidates, won the 4th Congressional District. We beat out 12 other candidates, including 2 incumbent county Republican Party chairmen, 1 former county chairman, and 2 incumbent state representatives. And that revealed Trump's strength at the grassroots level. So I attended the Republican National Convention. Now, it came on the heels of several Trump campaign rallies that had been disrupted by violent protests. Some of the protesters were physically assaulting Trump supporters. They were burning, they were raging, and they were rioting. They even shut down Trump's rally in Chicago. So tensions were very high. And many of us Trump delegates felt like we would be in danger from some of the anti-Trump rioters who were sure to congregate in Cleveland. Some of us talked about bringing firearms to the convention for self-protection. Well, the media went wild and had a field day with that. There were headlines such as this one from Mother Jones. Trump delegates were bringing guns to Cleveland. Politics PA, the headline read, report, Trump delegates armed and ready for the Cleveland convention. I'll tell you honestly, I was concerned for my physical safety. My wife thought I was headed to war and teared up as I was packing to leave. But when we arrived in Cleveland, the security was airtight and we felt perfectly safe. We never gave it another thought, really. We turned our attention instead to the Ohio delegation. Now, they were seated directly behind us, and they refused to stand for Melania Trump. They booed when a speaker said, "Make America Great Again," and they voted for John Kasich during the floor vote for president. And remember, Governor Kasich refused to even attend the convention. Instead, he traveled around the city bashing Trump. Well, that got our blood boiling. And being from Pittsburgh, I don't even like Ohio anyway. So I talked to my group of delegates, and we decided we would give Governor Kasich an unpleasant welcome when he spoke to our delegation the next morning. But we made one mistake. We told the Ohio delegates. So within 15 minutes of me texting one of my friends in the press this great scoop I was giving him, he replied with a copy of the press release from Governor Kasich's office at 10:15 that night. He had just canceled his speech to the Pennsylvania delegation due to a scheduling conflict. So we claimed victory, the media ate it up, and I tried coining the Kasich is playing the Hamlet of the Cuyahoga. That didn't make it too far. It made one headline, but people didn't really understand what I meant by that. In any event, seeing the groundswell of support for Trump during the primary and the strong support for him at the convention, I knew Trump would carry Pennsylvania. In fact, I knew it since the beginning of his campaign when he focused on the America First message of trade and immigration. That message appeals directly to the Reagan Democrats from Pittsburgh and Erie and Scranton and Johnstown that I saw help put Rick Santorum over the top in 1994 and Mike Fisher in 1996. Now, I've been writing for about a year that Trump would win the critical swing and Rust Belt states of Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, and Wisconsin. Everybody thought I was crazy. The Sunday before the general election, I wrote an op-ed in the Patriot News about how Donald Trump would win and win decisively. I received about 135 comments from readers. Just about every single one was negative. So let's have some fun and read some of them right now, and then I'll wrap up. One wrote, "Typical Trump-style BS. All cake and icing, no real substance. It takes more than attitude to win an election. A lot of reputations are going to be tarnished come Wednesday morning." Another wrote, "You are out of your ever-loving mind to think that Trump is going to win." Another wrote, "I hate getting up on Mondays, but this op-ed piece from Scaringi had me laughing so hard, it seemed a joy to go to work today." Another, "More flies attracted by the dog crap that is Donald Trump. 48 hours from now, you, Scaringi, will be irrelevantly deplorable." Another, "Looks like someone likes Trump so much that he copied his hair and complexion." Just a few more. "Just another deplorable, like cockroaches, they come out of the dark when they think they're safe. Take down names. Remember this lawyer for the scumbag he is. Squash them before they scurry back into the darkness." Whew. Another, "How did this guy pass the bar exam?" And my favorite, "Who should I vote for? Let's ask fat white lump." So I was fat shamed on the internet. And the list goes on. And I got on the treadmill that very morning, and I've been hitting the treadmill every single day since that comment. Now, I will tell you that at 4 a.m. that Tuesday morning, after having about 9 gin and tonics at the Trump victory party, I did find the time to answer every single one of those comments. Now, permit me to speak frankly about the election and the media. I don't mean to offend. This is just the way I talk. I could be wrong, by the way, but I don't think so. Those commenters on my Penn Live article were so wrong because they got their news from the national media, which convinced them only Hillary could win. Remember how stunned the media were when Trump won. They had not for one moment believed that a man who they mocked and disdained could win. In their minds, there could be no other than Hillary Clinton. That's because she embodied their worldview and belief system. The national news media are, frankly, liberal progressives, disguised as impartial journalists. They have controlled the news, and they've skewed it to support their worldview. Almost all are admittedly Democrats, and almost all admittedly voted for Hillary. Of the total campaign contributions given to the Clinton and Trump campaigns from people identified as working in the media, 96% went to Hillary. 4 went to Trump. I'd like to know who those 4 are. The national media have become the press office for the Democrat Party. They've enjoyed an exalted position in society and have gained and wielded the power to shape and control the culture in which we all live. And they were sitting pretty. Then came Donald Trump, like a giant wrecking ball with his loud and brash political incorrectness and his 100 million Twitter followers. Trump exposed the national media for what they are, in many cases, purveyors of fake news. Trump is destroying their credibility and exposing them as frauds. The national media are confronted with the loss of their exalted position in society, and they are fighting back. And that's why they're investing so much into this fake news story that the Trump campaign was colluding with the Russian government to hijack the election for Trump. Now, this story has dominated my radio show, which in January of 26 I moved to News Talk WHP 580 AM and iHeartRadio. And I've also written a lot about it in my regular column for Penn Live in the Patriot News. And it's critically important. It's an important news story because it's how the national media and the left are attempting to retroactively hijack the 2016 election. Because they disagree with the voting results, they want to call the election of Donald Trump a fraud. And as a result, America is at a tipping point. As we experience the highest levels of political violence since the early 1970s, as the media continue to call our president a liar, his election illegitimate, in his presidency a product of collusion with America's supposed enemy. And now, as they falsely claim the president obstructed justice and are even suggesting impeachment. Things will only get worse. More innocent Republicans, like Congressman Scalise, will be hurt or killed by members of the militant left whose irrational suspicions are being confirmed and evil passions are being stoked. James Hodgkinson, a militant, a Bernie Sanders volunteer, attempted a mass assassination of Republicans. He was radicalized by the national media and their allies in the entertainment industry, people who put out music videos showing Trump being shot, pictures of Trump beheaded, and plays in Central Park depicting Trump being assassinated, a la Julius Caesar. Those famous words, sic semper tyrannis, spoken by Shakespeare's Brutus, have stirred the minds of political assassins throughout the years, including John Wilkes Booth, the militant who assassinated the Republican Abraham Lincoln. In the prelude to the Civil War, Lincoln famously said, "A house divided against itself cannot stand." But in the same speech, Lincoln predicted the Union would not be dissolved and the house would not fall. He was wrong. It did. And over 600,000 Americans died in the war that followed. So let's remember and learn from our history so that we are not doomed to repeat it. The national media has a lot to do with whether we continue down this dangerous path. Let's hope they put our country and the safety of America and the American people first. Thank you all very much.